If you could just send it, I'd be really interested.
I actually had Becky prepare a timeline going forward. Let me see if I have a copy here. I did bring my copy. So April, at this board meeting, there would be approval for REPA rulemaking. In May, we would bring forth the corrected language that the AG expects to have happen with the REPA 2 language. And then in May, we would also file the notice of intent and submit the cost-benefit analysis to the state budget. In June, we would file the proposed rule and notice of a public hearing, and the public hearing notice published in the Indianapolis Star as is required. And then July, we would conduct the public hearing and collect online comments. In August, we would review public comments and determine recommended changes to the rule. In September, we would have board approval of final rule and submit it to the Attorney General. And in October, we would have the Attorney General review. In November, we would expect the Attorney General forward rule to the Governor's office, and after review, then there's the approval and the filing with the LSA. And the actual rule then, if everything went according to plan, would be implementation in December, 30 days after the Governor might file the approved rule.
And what are you thinking about the July public hearings? I was just curious.
Ask
The
your question
public
again.
hearing in July?
You mean a date?
Yes. No, how are you thinking that's going to be conducted? Here?
Oh, I honestly haven't thought about
Okay.
that.
I was just curious.
Yeah, I haven't thought about where
Okay.
to actually have it.
Becky,
But I will get this to you.
That's okay. I typed it out. Thank you.
are those timelines minimum, maximum, inside, outside?
That would be best case. I try to allow, part of what we can't account for are sending it back to state budget. There's no defined timeline for them, so I've sort of just best guessed it. I think at the outside, if it wasn't effective in December, it would be effective in January, is my guess, David. And of course, that all is reliant upon being granted an exception to the moratorium.
And do we now have from the OAG's office everything we need so that they can tell us before the rule comes to us in May that they will approve it?
I believe so. We have what they told us was wrong with it. I built in the April timeline, what else is in there is submitting to OMB for the exception, getting the rule corrected, and the Attorney General's office has offered an informal review of what we've done to make sure it's good to come to the board in May. So assuming we could get all that done in April, it could come to you in May. You know, we might be a month off. David, you know how this works. That would be my best guess.
Okay.
When did we pass this? When did we, December 5th? So it's going to take a year. When did this go after we passed it, after all the hearings?
It's in January, the final piece, your January meeting.
And how long did it take to get over the Attorney General's office?
I believe we submitted your timeline. I gave you the timeline. It was submitted. Keep in mind, we had transition time here for me to come on board as well.
Pardon me?
February 22nd.
February 22nd,
February 22nd, so it took a while.
trying to find my
And
timeline.
was that when it was
We approved it.
February 22nd? Becky, was that when it was finally ready? It was not ready until February 22nd.
It was submitted on February 22nd.
Was that when it was ready? Was it ready at all earlier than February 22nd?
On the 5th, on the timeline, on the 4th, the actual language was submitted to us for review at the Department of Education, as well as 2 other memos. And then the documentation was compiled and reviewed in the transmittal letter written.
We voted on it in January and it got there
And
a
submitted
month
February
later.
22nd.
I just was asking if it was ready earlier than that and it just was getting some final review, or was it the final date, it was absolutely finally ready, was the 22nd?
22nd. because
I
we
know
had a
that's when it was
transmittal letter.
submitted. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, was it ready at all before it was submitted?
The timeline says the rule was finalized in the LSA format February 4th.
Correct.
So then I'm asking,
What happened between February
what
5th?
happened between them?
Setting.
There was documentation was compiled, reviewed, the transmittal letter was begun on February 18th, and the 22nd was the submittal of the entire, it's like a 5-ring binder, 5-inch binder of information, and that's when it was submitted. There was no intent in any way for this department to delay REPA 2.
Here's the problem. We worked on this for 20 months. From the day that this was initiated, July 6, 2011, to the day it died a procedural death on March 31st. I mean, 20 months passed by. Regardless of what you feel about REPA, whether you're for it or against it, it's just unacceptable that policymaking of this body not be submitted and move forward on the merits. To me, this is a procedural death that occurred here. I mean, at the point it was not sent in by February 13th, we did not allow the statutory time for the Attorney General to review it. Now, he went on and reviewed it, but we submitted it after the legal deadline for it to get reviewed. And I would just hope in the future that just can't happen, regardless of how anyone feels about a particular piece of policy.
Amen.
Amen, that's a lot of work, now we're gonna be another year. And so it's a lot of, and it creates distrust, is what happens.
But also, just understand, that we, when I say we, us, Dr. Bennett, whatever, we chose not to bring that to meetings along the way. Because there were times that was delayed by the choice of the DOE leadership at that time. Because
that did not
I can remember it being on the agendas, proposed agendas, because I kept asking this, because it was a very controversial type situation. So I kept asking, when will that be on the agenda?
That did not happen. There's
Yeah,
no
well,
documentation.
Becky's right there, and I would call Becky, and I would say.
Well, that's different. The board was not
Okay,
aware of that.
but I would call Becky and said, is it gonna be on the agenda this month?
Yeah, but that's a different
No.
kind of delay, Mike, you know.
That's a different.
I mean,
That's
Once
that-
we
but
pass
that's-
it-
that's
once we
that's a
pass it,
delay,
It's
though.
sad.
no, but that's not the same kind
That's
of.
me
delay.
calling
But
someone
that's,
asking what
that's,
the weather
that, but
is.
that's a delay, and my whole thing in the beginning was, we were okaying a draft that we never saw.
We are where we are.
Yeah.
Tony's made the point that in the future, and I didn't hear Dr. Rich disagreeing with it, that we need to make sure we're getting the deadlines on this, and we're in a transition period, new administration. I think we ought to just move on, honor Tony's input, and make sure that in the May meeting, we've done everything we can do to get the rule in front of us and move forward. It's pretty clear the board knows what it wants to do with some disagreement from two members. Well, let's just move on, and Tony hit the right, in my humble opinion, hit the right tone, which is in the future, let's just be more crisp about this.
And I appreciate that. Thank you, Dave.
Without further discussion, we'll take a roll call vote for approval to initiate rulemaking for rules for educator preparation and accountability.
Aye. Nay.
Aye.
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 No. The motion approves. Is approved.
Board operations, could I just ask Becky to send out, for those of us that hear it, put it down, mess up our calendars, when the board meetings are going to be out into the future?
Sure.
Thank you.
Can I ask another question in that regard? Do you anticipate, I know this is a slightly unfair question, but, because you're still in your early days, but do you anticipate having study sessions every board meeting, some board meetings, occasionally? How do you?
I actually would like to have them each board meeting. I
Okay.
think they're helpful to have dialogue amongst ourselves. So I would like to have a portion of each meeting be a study session.
Okay.
Here's what I do appreciate, Gail, and this is even before you came on the board, and Dan and I, and we were all there. It used to be the procedure with Dr. Reed. Remember, we would come down the day before and have basically a discussion meeting, and then we'd have to, Jim and I'd have to stay all night, and then we'd get up the next morning and come back for about an hour meeting. And so I appreciate the time for discussion, and I appreciate it being on the same day, because with me, I was losing 2 days at school.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
the one thing just wanted to clarify that in terms of going forward, I have generally been able to kind of plan for afternoon meetings or lunch meetings, on days of board meetings. But I think if we're going to do this, then we probably have to just assume that the meetings will last a bit longer than they have in
Well,
the past.
I plan on not having the board meetings, the timeframe I was given when I came was 9 to 1 was set aside for board meeting time. And so I don't plan to go beyond that, and we haven't. So unless we have any other items to come before this board. Oh, no.
So the only other thing that you and I discussed yesterday is to the extent possible, when we are going to have discussions, if there's something that can be distributed in advance that we can read. And I also mentioned the possibility of using some articles or studies or research work that
might
is
go
of
along
interest to
with
you,
it.
that might go along with it, that would be good to have in advance.
Okay. Dan?
One topic under study was future agenda items. We put a lot of time in revising and working on ISTEP over the years, looking at one report and input after another. To what extent what we're doing now with ISTEP at the state level, not talking about all the classroom growth and et cetera, how educators can use the present ISTEP testing to measure growth, and what we know about how we've calibrated that to do such things. Because today we talked about that we can't use the present testing system to understand growth. I'd like to explore that a little further. It's not exactly my understanding.
No, I think we do have access to growth information at ISTEP, but it's from year to year. But assessment will continue to be a dialogue for topic
It'd be a good topic.
discussion, for sure. Seeing no other comments, this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.